All right. Welcome to Celebrating Fatherhood 365. 365 out of days out of the year. Not bad. It's been a while since we've been on live, I believe. I may have been on last week. I'm not sure. I needed a break. Friday was my birthday. Went out of town, so I was preparing for that trip, mentally for that trip. So I guess I was already gone on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for that trip. So tonight, we may have someone call in. I see Nick has joined us. Feel free to chime in. Raise your hand if you want to talk. Let me know you're there. Tonight, we're going to be discussing fatherhood. And I think I wanna bring in religion tonight because that's such a taboo discussion, and I want to talk about that. I think maybe we can demystify it a little bit. Everybody have difference of opinion on the subject, and I'm hoping that my guest calls in. I might need to call him. Let me see. I like the phone aspect of what we do, so. Even though they're not on live, we can still talk to people. But in the vein of self-care, that's the mind, the body, spirit, and finances, or spirit, mind, body, finances. Sometimes people used to say spirit, mind, and body, but I've added finance over the years because finance is very, very important. And when you look at all four of those, I want you to think in terms of a chair with four legs. Which leg is not important? Which leg do we cut off? Which leg or how many legs do we cut off that chair? I have an opportunity to work with a family that cultural differences, I would say, not getting into too much detail. We have cultural differences. So it's going to be interesting. However, the family is non-religious. They don't practice anything. I'm not saying they don't believe. Maybe they don't believe. Maybe they're agnostic. Maybe they are atheists. I don't know. Haven't gotten that far in the conversation yet or not. But it's going to be an interesting conversation to look at a chair that has four legs and walking in the door mentally saying they've already cut off one leg. So to me, it creates a dysfunctional chair. And to me, it would explain why the relationships are dysfunctional. However, I know that not everyone share my religious or spiritual beliefs. So that makes it interesting as well. But I'm always coming in with the spirit of learning and asking questions and trying to understand you. One of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite authors, Dr. Stephen A. Covey, I believe his name is. He says, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." So I always, when conversating with people, I'm coming to understand you and your thought process and why you do the things you do and get the outcomes that you get before I start talking about my belief system. Because at the end of the day, most people don't care about my belief system anyway. They only care about their own. They're not interested in changing and growing unless they can see benefit to it themselves. And they have to see it for themselves in order to benefit from it. So religion, spirituality, Christianity, whatever you want to call it, it's out there, be it agnostic or atheist or whatever religion or non-religion you practice. It impacts you. It impacts the way you think. It impacts the way you act. It impacts the way you treat people. And also, just to acknowledge, next Sunday is this Sunday coming is Mother's Day. So we want to wish all the mothers a happy Mother's Day coming up on May the 10th, I believe it is. Yeah, May the 10th. That's my grandfather's birthday. He was born May 10th, 1917. Passed away a few years ago. Quite some time ago, come to think of it. But that being said, definitely want to wish all the mothers happy Mother's Day. And hopefully I'll remember to say it again a few more times for those mothers who are out there. Mothers are important, and this show is dedicated to promoting fathers are as important as mothers. You know, even though we don't get the same credit, even though we don't get the same accolades, the role of fathers, the role of mothers are very important. You know, I'm not saying that they're equal in structure, because we're not equal, but I want to say that they are both necessary and or required if you want to have or create a healthy and balanced child that's free of dysfunction. That should be the goal. We want to be free of dysfunction. So, I was hoping my guest would be here. I think I might end up having to call him because, you know, he is of a different faith practice than myself, and we have these discussions from time to time, randomly, and you know, I admire the growth. You know, regardless of the path that he has chosen, I admire the growth, and I continue to encourage him to grow. You know, to read, to study. You know, I remember meeting him and him being atheist to some degree, agnostic to a certain degree. So I encourage him then to study all religions and all faiths. And I believe he did to a degree, but he settled on 1, 2. I'm going to say 1, 2 because, you know, we have discussions about Islam and Christianity. So he says he reads both books. So that's going to be interesting, you know, with that. And we may have this discussion with other people because I think it's important as fathers to make a decision. And not making a decision is a decision, whether you know it or not. You know, if you choose to let your children decide for themselves, you've made a decision. You know, to not engage, to not teach, to not involve yourself in that aspect of their life. And my question would be, why? You know, it's kind of like having a child go out with for lack of a better metaphor, a kite and play in a thunderstorm with a key attached to it. You know, they'll figure it out eventually. Let me see if I can give him a call. You may hear it ring. You may hear it ring, but let's see. Yep, it is ringing. Let him know I gave them this big build up. And coming on. If he doesn't come, it's not a big deal. I will definitely have him back on to have this discussion. But, you know, I wanted to bring these as discussion points. So if you are viewing this program later on, which a lot of people do view it later on, ask yourself these questions and think about, you know, is religion important to the well-being of your family? And how important is it? And of what faith do you practice? Or are you so spiritually minded you're no earthly good? You know, we have a lot of, in fact, I'm right here in the Metro Richmond area, and we have churches everywhere. Churches everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. So, you know, and of different faiths. So, if you are ignorant or don't want to know, this is, you know, you have no excuse, because Or if you want to know, you have no excuse because they're everywhere. And we need to ask questions. My number one rule for everything is to ask. If you don't know, ask someone. Don't just be ignorant, willful ignorance. You want to know something. Ignorance means you don't know. You're not aware, don't know the facts. Let's get the information and make quality decisions with that, because you want your children, or do you want your children to follow in your footsteps, in your paths? And believe it or not, spiritually speaking, when your children see you, they see you or can perceive you as a God. To them, you are representative. You are an ambassador of whatever faith you are practicing. So you're an example. That's what I mean. When I say God, I mean you're an example of that to them. And are you being a good example to them? We want to be conscious of that as well. And so many of us not, I think 30, 40 years ago in this country, and this is numbers I heard growing up, that the United States was 97% Christian. This has been some time ago, and I will tell you now, it is not the case anymore. It is not the case anymore. I don't know what the percentage is, but I don't see it as much as I did maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Yes, I'm dating myself a little bit with that, and that's okay. This white beard tells it all too. Even though I may not look old, this white beard is a somewhat of a giveaway. Still don't have any wrinkles. Don't wear glasses. I'm not saying I'm in perfect health, but not feeling too bad. Every day is interesting as we get older. But, the challenge is mind, body, spirit, finances. What plan do we have in place? What are we putting in place to educate ourselves in those 4 areas? And what are we teaching our children? Because this show is about fatherhood. And we cannot leave it to the mothers to teach our children. That would be a mistake. Yes, we are to leave aspects of it to the mothers. There are certain things that mothers do better than fathers do. We get that. But if you want to have balance in the equation, you definitely want to include mothers and fathers to ensure that the child is growing up and seeing both aspects of life. It's interesting. This day and time we live in now is very interesting, can be very confusing. Tonight I taught my parenting class, and we talked about fear-based parenting, unconscious parenting, and a lot of lessons we are taught these days are unconscious. It is unfortunate, but it is true. A lot of unconscious teaching going on. So what do we do? How do we fix it? How do we improve? I'm looking at all 4 areas of your life, my life, spiritually. Are we connecting? Are we growing in all 4 areas of our lives? Are they important to us? Are they important to our children? Well, he has not showed up yet. I'm going to give him another 10 minutes. And if he does not show up, I'm going to shut it down, because I said I would do 30 minutes tonight. It's hard to do this program when you don't have a guest to talk to, when you don't have a topic of discussion. That's why I wanted to talk about religion tonight and bring that forward, because there are a lot of people in this country today who don't believe, who are more, profess to be spiritual. I'm not sure what that means, but they profess to be more spiritual than of any faith. And recently within the last 10 years, I've heard of another faith that embraces all faiths, and that is the Baha'i faith. Baha'i. Don't ask me how to spell it because I probably will spell it wrong and perhaps have enunciated it incorrectly. But I have a cousin who practices that faith. I've met people who practice that faith, and they embrace the good of all faiths. And kind of like pushed it all together, and they practice that, leaving out Christianity, parts of Christianity, leaving out parts of Islam, leaving out parts of everything. They bring it all together. So is faith important to fathers? Should it be important to you and to your children? And if you have left it out of the teaching of your children, how has it impacted their growth and development? Are they dysfunctional? Ooh, my nose itch. Are they dysfunctional? Are they functional? And how do you feel about that? That can be challenging. You look at, like the title of my book is From Dysfunction to Functional. And most of the families, now this is just my opinion, my observation, is not rooted in fact, but so many families leave it out, and we see the dysfunction because they have left it out. Even when it comes to the spouse-to-spouse relationship or the marriage relationship, when it's left out, it leads to a lot of dysfunction. And even if it's not done or practiced correctly, it leads to dysfunction. So I believe, this is my opinion, that all aspects of you are important. You need all four legs of the chair to sit comfortably. That would be the mind, the body, the spirit, and the finances. You need to work on, you need to develop, you need to practice all of them. Mind, body, spirit, and finances. So I'm just throwing this out for thought, for you to think about. If you come back and watch this program, I think it would be great. You could put something in the comment section. I do get notified. Now, we always talk about this program. Original concept was to recognize fathers who are doing it correctly, who are teaching, instructing, providing, protecting, and cultivating their families. I call it a fivefold ministry. Is another one that I recently added based on the conversation I had with a previous guest on here. Maybe I have to get him back on as well. But I don't want to shy away from subjects or topics because it may offend someone, because I think we should be able to talk about it. But, you want to be able to provide and protect, teach, instruct, and cultivate relationships with your children. And one of the challenges we face is, if you don't teach your child spirit, who will? And what are they going to teach them? Are they going to teach them what you want them to learn or know? Or they're going to teach them something different? Because everybody has an agenda when it comes to spiritual growth and spiritual maturity. Everybody has an, even when your pastor preaches, he has an agenda. You want to know what that agenda is. And the only way sometimes to know what that agenda is for you to study, to show yourself approved. You need to read. You need to study. And so many of us don't, for whatever reason. And then we shake our heads. We wonder why things are not going well for us. Why this keep happening to me? Why? And a lot of it can be explained if you were to incorporate a spiritual understanding, spiritual growth within yourself. Because remember, it starts with the individual. You must grow and change. Then goes to the family. What are you teaching your family? And then it goes to the community, and then it goes to the world. We can write a book that could maybe impact generations. We can teach some core values that could impact generations. But if the individual doesn't grow, mature, or change, then what does that do for the family? What does it say about the family? And I like what John Maxwell said. Had to access some memory there. He said, everything rises or falls on leadership. So men, fathers, if you want to be the head of the household and you want to be respected as the head of the household, then that means you are what? Responsible for everything that goes on within your family system. Because it rises or falls, good or bad. What it says, goodness or evil, whatever you want to call it, it rises or falls based on what? Leadership. If you were interviewing leaders to lead your family, would you hire yourself to be that leader? Are you qualified yourself to be that leader? Have you been trained or taught to be that leader? It's an interesting concept there. You know, it don't just happen because you are a male. You know, we grow through stages of development. There's the boy. You know, you got the little toddler, then you have the boy, you got the teenager, then you got the young adult, then you have the adult. You know, we all are male or female. We got that part down. But once you become an adult, next growth cycle would be what? You would become a husband, hopefully in that order. Then you become the father. And after father comes grandfather. And each one of those hats, each one of those roles that we play, you're wearing a different hat. Your position changes, your strategy must change as well. Or you think you're going to keep doing the same thing you did as a teenager, as a young adult, or as a father, as a husband. It's not going to work. It's not going to last. So what life lessons did you learn through that process that you hold near and dear today? I'm talking about the values that you learned. Or are you saying you did what your dad did, you saw your dad do this, so you did the exact same thing? How is that working for you? Are you getting your father's results? Are you getting your mother's results? Or do you think we need to, and I say, including myself, we need to do better? Okay, so in my humble but accurate opinion, I like to say that, humble but accurate opinion, all four legs are important on that chair. So don't cut any of them off. I'm not saying that you have to study them all at one time, but you make a study, do research on all of them so that it can benefit your family, your community, and then the world. Because who wins when you grow? Who wins when you grow in those areas? My answer is, I think the answer is everyone. Okay? And it is coming up on 9:30. I am going to shut down. But before I do, Nick, you've been listening. Hopefully you've been listening to me. I haven't been talking to myself. What are your thoughts and opinions on what I've talked about so far tonight? Can you unmute yourself and talk for a few minutes? You feel comfortable?
Yeah, hang on.
Okay, there you go. How you doing, man? Oh, you muted again. There
Are
we
you
go.
there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. What are your
Uh,
thoughts?
yeah, I've been listening. Just kind of listening today. I'm not that religious myself, but something I've always been kind of keeping in the back of my mind. Some of my friends are, some of my good fishing friends are that, and I'm always going fishing on Sundays and they're not, uh, and they're trying to get me more in it. I just never grown up very religious to begin with.
Right.
Um, I'm not saying I don't believe or anything like that because I do. It just hasn't been a big part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just something to think about as my child grows. With his mother's side, she's not very religious either, but her parents are, so his grandparents are.
Right.
And it's so far we have not raised him that way to go to church and whatnot. So I'm just trying to think of how I want to approach that moving forward. Is it something I kind of want to influence him in, or, my friends are trying to get us to go and believe more? Is it something I want to do moving forward? So it's something I've been thinking about more recently. It's just I hadn't grown up that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The way we grow up has a lot to do with it, but I want you to ask yourself, do you want your child to grow up the same way? Or does he have to grow up the same way you did? Being that, and even with so, the world has changed so much, so what lessons or who's going to teach him if you don't? Even, this is my definition. When I think about Christianity, I think of Christianity as example. That's how I perceive Christianity, as an example. You have to be the example. Especially in a household, you want to be that example. Now, if you're not the example to your children, then who is? Or what is? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. So I'm glad you've been thinking about it lately. I think that's awesome. But at some point in time, I'm hoping that, being that you are a father, and I just show it's about fatherhood, you want to put something in action and at least go and get your questions asked. If you have reservations or concerns, and not saying you have to go to their church or be with them, you may find something else that works for you. But for me, when it comes to religion and spirituality, Christianity, whatever you want to put, to me, it's called example. So
I
this,
mean, I
I'm
just
just
think
giving you some
overall,
food for thought.
yeah, I just think overall it's a positive experience, and that whether or not you believe certain ways or what, I think the people that are associated in those communities are positive, and I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
Setting examples and positive role models and just being kind, and that's kind of what I associate religion and church with, and that can never be harmful.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing. And on that note, I'm going to shut down. We are at 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes. I didn't plan on being on for an hour today, but I did want to come on and have a conversation, and I thought this was great. And I appreciate your input. That lets me know you've been listening, and continue to watch, man. Hopefully, we can engage more in conversation ourselves in the future. Okay.
Definitely, thank you. I appreciate it. Have
All
a good
right.
evening.
You too. You have a good one. And on that note, I'm going to say good evening, goodbye to everyone. God bless. And we will see you on next Monday with Celebrating Fatherhood 365. God bless.
Rec-